Governor of the Reserve Bank is expected to announce the Monetary Policy Committee's decision on the repo rate. That's the rate at which the central bank loans money to commercial banks. Currently, the repo rate is at 8.25% and the prime lending rate is 11.75%. Yesterday, the inflation numbers were released, showing that inflation is at 5.9%, an increase of half a percentage point. We're joined in studio by Newzroom Afrika's business reporter Motheo Khoaripe to help us make sense of what we're likely to hear, Motheo, because what South Africans want to know is that will it be a season to be jolly? Already, if you're servicing a loan or a debt or whatever it is, you'd have received an SMS from your lender to say, hey, come this date, we're going to be taking something off. So will you have a little bit extra that you're left with as an individual?
I can tell you, between you and I and the rest of the South African households, what we want to hear is a 5-letter word called pause today, at least from the SARB. But with the inflation number that you were talking about going up to 5.9%, that could be quite difficult given that it's now closer to the Reserve Bank's target range of between 3 and 6%. And of course, they would have sat down and looked at this number and how inflation has gone up over the period and kind of discussed whether this causes for a push, maybe to 25 basis points in terms of interest rates. No one in South Africa wants to hear that. I mean, we've done all the cuts. We've cut down on the luxuries we used to have, the things we used to enjoy, and we just buy the basics these days. We've moved around our budgets to make sure that we can pay for our homes and pay for our cars and also afford transport to work, all sorts of things we've had to move around to make sure that we can keep up with the high cost of living. So another interest rate hike would leave us in a position where we'll look at the festive season as not so festive.
Now, what have you not tightened? That belt cannot move any longer, right? And you mentioned car and home payments. If you use public transport, you'll note also that the prices of taxi fares are going up on the 27th of November as well. How has this impacted car and home repayments?
Well, when you go back to November of 2021, where the hiking cycle started, where the SARB started to increase interest rates, it's increased rates by 475 basis points. Now, that's left people with bond repayments, car repayments, and other loan repayments with a lot of money to move around to try and make up those payments. When we look at home loans, they've gone up by almost 40% in some cases, where people are paying 8,000 Rand more than they did in 2021. Car repayments are up more than 13%, and that's where you're seeing a lot of defaults now coming into play. A lot of people saying, look, I need to downgrade my lifestyle. I can't afford this anymore. A lot of people going into the market to try sell off their houses because, I mean, you'd rather keep what you have than have the bank coming in to knock to say, why haven't you paid at least 3 times for your repayments? But looking at the car repayments as well, it's affected the new car sales market. That's gone down over the period. A lot of people looking for cheaper, more affordable second-hand cars as well to try and get into a bracket where they can afford the petrol. That's also quite volatile as well. Let's remember that also pushes up inflation. And those are the things that South African households have to bear with when it comes to interest rates. It's not just your bank sending you an SMS to say, tomorrow we'll be increasing, buddy, just stick with us. But it's also what happens with that as well. Are your kids staying in the same schools this year, next year? We know that during this entire period, a lot of people haven't had their incomes go up during the period. In fact, at a particular point, inflation was beating inflation as well. So we didn't have disposable income to pay for some of these costs, and we're looking down a barrel where the things that we need as basics, a roof over your head, to get around, to get to work on time, is becoming quite tough in South Africa.
Hopefully, one day soon, we're going to be having a discussion about why it takes you so long to service such a debt that is an essential need. When you speak of a roof over your head and a car to drive, where you find yourself not being able to service that debt, that commitment sometimes is much longer than a commitment that is made before a magistrate. When we take a look at the composition of the Monetary Policy Committee and how they voted the last time there wasn't consensus, are we expecting more of the same?
I'm expecting a very tight decision today because even in the last rates announcement in September, it was a 3-2 split, 3 voting for a hold on interest rate at 8.25% and 2 voting for a hike, saying that inflation was still too high. In fact, in his last meeting speech, Kganyago was saying the job of tapering inflation in South Africa is not over. So that just gives you an idea what could happen today if they all decide, look, we all agree inflation is still too high. We're still not comfortable with it being at the midpoint of the target band, which is around 4%. It's currently at 5.9. So it's outside of that if we really are looking at the numbers. And that could be a pushing factor to say, look, let's hike rates. But another thing that could happen is to say, let's hold rates, because inflation was pushed up yesterday by a one-time event, which was the avian flu outbreak that pushed up poultry and egg prices, and that's why you saw the food inflation go up so much yesterday. Egg prices up 24% year on year. So that's a one-time event, and if the industry gets through that particular period, we could see prices then going down again. Also, the petrol price into the festive season is expected to be lower because, of course, oil prices have remained low. There's weaker demand from China for oil, and that's why we've seen that price go down. But also the rand has been stronger over the past month, and that could mean lower petrol and diesel prices. So they could consider that to say, let's hold and see what happens into the new year, and maybe wait for a January meeting to decide whether we hike rates or not.
You speak of the rand, and what about the elephant in the room? Because some South Africans will also be looking forward to hearing, and if anything at all, about the rand manipulation in light of the Competition Commission's report.
One of the mandates for the South African Reserve Bank, of course, is to protect the rand, if one can put it simply. And we'd like to hear, of course, from the sub-governor what he makes of what the Competition Commission has found in all the settlements that we've seen from Citibank, settlements that we've seen from Standard Chartered of 42 million rand. Yes, a slap on the wrist, but they're willing to share information on the other banks that have been involved in the rand manipulation. A lot of South Africans calling for a prosecution of the individuals involved. Also politicians saying they're quite concerned that a country's currency, literally our unit to trade with the rest of the world, can be played around with like this. Something needs to happen. So we're expecting a stronger stance from the Reserve Bank. And let's hear what the SARB has to say, and Kganyago has to say about this. Of course, we all depend on the rand. Everyone depends on that rand in their pocket, in their accounts, to make life happen. So we need to protect it by all means.
Like we said, money is always on time, and we can tell you from our bird's eye view that we see the governor getting ready. Thank you very much, Motheo Khoaripe. I understand you staying to take it over with Stephen Groothuis. Have yourselves a magic day further. We like you.